Welcome to session number 24 of FileMaker Group Therapy for Citizen Developers. My name is Tim Jones. In today's session, we're going to study JavaScript Object Notation, or JSON, and learn what JSON is. We'll learn the JSON syntax, its language and grammar. We'll also learn some of the FileMaker functions that read and write in JSON format. And finally, see how to pass data in JSON format and parse it, that is, extract data values out of it once it's been received. JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. It's a very simple, plain text language for exchanging data between systems. As you can see in the sample on the right, it presents data in an easy-to-read, self-describing format. Once received, it's easy to parse into its individual elements. It is also lighter weight than XML and nicer to look at. JSON enjoys wide support. It's been in FileMaker since version 16. It's tightly woven into JavaScript, the scripting language for web applications, which is, by the way, supported in FileMaker web viewers as of FileMaker version 19. We'll do a session soon on JavaScript add-ons in FileMaker web viewers. Many other programming languages like Python and PHP have built-in functions for working with JSON. Most importantly, it's used as one of the data interchange formats by countless web services and APIs, application programming interfaces, that we can tap into and query for data. For example, these weather APIs pass back weather data in the JSON format. Many mapping APIs like Google Maps use JSON. These stock market APIs pass back their data in the JSON format. In fact, most REST APIs do. Therefore, if you can read and write data in JSON format, it opens many new possibilities. So let's get started learning the JSON syntax, starting with the smallest piece, the data element. JSON data is written as a key value pair separated by a colon. The keys, like name and price, shown in the sample on the right, are like field names, and they must be wrapped in double quotes. Values can be either simple or complex. Simple values are of the type string, which means text, number, Boolean, which is true or false, or null. Complex values can be a JSON object or an array, both of which you'll learn about shortly. Values cannot be a date, a JavaScript function, or undefined. You must wrap all string values in double quotes, but none of the other data types get quotes. And we use commas to separate data elements from each other. Also, notice the curly braces around these two data elements, which groups them into a JSON object. A JSON object is one or more key value pairs. You can think of an object as being like a record, though sometimes you'll use it more like a table. Objects must be wrapped in curly braces. In the sample on the right, the root object is wrapped in the outer curly braces, and within that, the product value had to be wrapped in curly braces because it's more than just a simple value. It's a JSON object containing one or more key value pairs. We can access values in an object using one of two notations. The dot notation lets us specify the path to a data value like this: object name dot key, which in this example would return donut. The bracket notation, on the other hand, puts the key in square brackets and single quotes. This example returns breads. I recommend using dot notation, except when there's an actual dot in a key name. Then you must use the bracket notation. So JSON objects are groups of data made up of key value pairs. Sometimes we don't need to give a name, a key, to values, though. We just need them listed. For that, we use arrays. An array is a numbered list of values without keys. Items are separated by commas, and the array is surrounded by square brackets. The numbers aren't in the code, but us humans instinctively number items in a list. Donut is the first product in this list, right? And bran muffin is the third. However, in JSON, arrays are 0 based, which means we start counting at 0 rather than 1. Therefore, donut would be at index number 0 and bran muffin would be at index number 2. We can access values in an array using bracket notation like this, where we start with the key, products in this example, then put the index number of the item we want in square brackets. Item number 2 in this products array is bran muffin. To summarize what we've learned so far, JSON data is written as a key wrapped in double quotes, followed by a colon, followed by a value, and separated from the next key value pair, if there is one, by a comma. Values can be a simple string of text, number, Boolean, or null. Or a value can be a JSON object, which is one or more key value pairs wrapped in curly braces. Or a value can be an array, which is a list of values without keys that is wrapped in square brackets. All right, that's enough syntax for now. Let's see how JSON works in FileMaker. Here's our beloved animal care database, and I'll go into the script workspace and create a new blank script. We'll call it JSON Practice. I'll define a variable called $product, where we can use the FileMaker function of JSON Set Element to create or add to a field or variable that contains JSON data. The JSON functions all start with the letters JSON, so they're easy to find. There are only 6 of them. We're going to use JSON Set Element to create or add an element to a JSON variable. Now, here's how it comes out by default. I prefer to stack it up with line breaks and tabs, and so I've got a copy of my functions over here in a text file, and I'll just copy and paste for convenience. There we go. There's the same thing with the 4 arguments broken out, each on their own line with some nice indentation. Okay, so the first argument, JSON, is where are we trying to set this element? What's the variable or the text field, or even just a string of text here that contains JSON data or that we want to contain JSON data? Well, I had decided that I wanted to call this variable $product. That's where we're going to be storing our JSON data. So I'm going to use that same variable name again. There. Now the next 2 arguments, key or index or path, and value, right? Remember, a JSON data element is a key followed by a value. Both have to be strings. So I'm just going to wrap them in quotes already, put the quotes in there to start with. And then this last argument, the type argument, is where we declare what kind of what kind of element we're going to be adding as this value. What is this value? And here are the valid value types: JSON string, JSON number, JSON Boolean, JSON null, JSON object, and JSON array. They probably sound familiar because they're the same data types that we just talked about being qualified to have as values. So the type in this particular element that we're going to set is going to be a JSON object. So I'm going to type JSON object, and no, it does not autocomplete. Those suggestions were simply the JSON functions. We have to type those values ourselves. You can also use some code numbers for them and look in the help for those code numbers. All right. Let's say that we want to name this product A, and we want to give it 3 values, 3 properties. Okay. The first one is going to be the name, and we're going to give it a name of donut, and then price, and then special. Okay. Now, since there are going to be 3 key value pairs, that constitutes an object. Objects have to be surrounded in curly braces. So I'll go ahead and start the curly braces now. There's my opening curly brace. We'll come down a few lines. There's my closing curly brace, and then we'll come up in between. Okay. And again, a data element is simply a name wrapped in double quotes. And this one is going to be actually name, or I should say it's a key name wrapped in double quotes, then a colon there, and then the value. And if the value is a string, it also has to be wrapped in double quotes like so. Okay. And then if we're going to have another key value pair, then we put a comma. The spacing is optional. Of course, all this white space is ignored, but certainly makes the formulas look easier to read. And then let's say my next key is going to be the price of that product. So the key name wrapped in double quotes, followed by a colon, followed by this time the number, and that's going to be $1.99. We don't put numbers in quotes. In fact, strings are the only ones that get surrounded in quotes on the value side of the key value pair. Our last key value pair is going to indicate whether this item is on a special deal or not. Is it on special? So we wrap the key name in double quotes, then a colon, and this is going to be a Boolean that is true or false. And let's say donuts are not on special right now. So we just type the word false as the Boolean. All right. Now, you can probably see that there's a problem arising here. This whole string has to be surrounded in quotes, double quotes particularly. And so the double quotes that are inside that string are problematic. We talked about the same issue when we were learning about our execute SQL function in our last 2 sessions. This quotation mark right here would be misconstrued as being the end of this quoted passage. And then the rest of it would be like, who knows what that is. We need these inside quotation marks to be treated as their literal values of literally quote marks, rather than their programmatic values as being the end of this quoted expression. That means we need to escape them by preceding each one with a backslash. There. I'll say okay. And okay again. All right. Now let's add a show custom dialog script step so that we can just get a little feedback on how our results are coming out. In this show custom dialog, we'll just have it have a title of alert, and we won't need a cancel button since this is just for information. And for the message, we're going to use another one of those JSON functions. This one is the JSON list keys function, which will return the object names or key names of the element specified by whatever path we indicate. So JSON list keys, it has a counterpart, JSON list values, which will bring back the values rather than the keys. JSON list keys asks for these 2 arguments. First of all, where's your JSON data? It's in that variable that I called product on the previous line. And then what key or index number or path do you want to specify? And if I want to just specify the root level of the JSON data object, we use quote quote with nothing in between. You could put a dot in between, but it's optional. Quote quote indicates the root level, not digging into any child element, if you will, of that JSON data object. And we'll say okay, or JSON data string. And okay again. All right, we'll save that script. And now let's run it using the debugger. Okay, we'll get the data viewer showing as well. And as I step into this first set variable statement, a new variable called $product is added. And look at that. We got a good healthy string of JSON data, right? A key followed by a colon followed by its value. And its value is an object a group of other key value pairs. Key value with colons in between. Fantastic. Now it's not pretty, but it is proper. We'll beautify it in a moment with the JSON Format Elements function. Okay. Next, as I step into our show custom dialog, we asked it to return the keys from the root level of this JSON string. So we'll step into that and we should just get the letter A because A was the only key that we introduced so far. Fantastic. It's working. There. Let me get this out of our way as well. Okay. Next, let's go back and wrap that JSON Set Element function inside a JSON Format Elements function. Okay, let me introduce that function to you. JSON Format Elements just adds indents and line breaks to make the JSON data easier to read. It only needs us to feed it the JSON that we want to beautify. So I'll just get rid of that closing paren for now. I'll move this opening paren down. I'll go over and indent everything a couple of spaces more. I like proper indenting in my calculations. That comes over too, and then we'll add the closing parenthesis for the JSON Format Elements function, which balances this one here with there, and this one here is balanced there. It's all nice and easy to see. All right, let's try that. We'll say, okay, I'll save the script and run it in the debugger. And as we step into it now with the data viewer showing, our product variable looks much better. It's exactly the same results, just with a lot of white space added in, tabs and or indents and line breaks. So much prettier. That's what the JSON Format Elements function does. And again, our custom dialog should come back with, at this point, just the key value or just the key name of A. Nice. Now let's add products B and C to our catalog of products. I'll duplicate this set variable step a couple of times, and we'll go in here and say, let's make another product. Now, JSON Set Element, that function, if you point it to an existing element, then it will replace that existing element with whatever value you provide. But if you point it to a new element, one that doesn't exist, it will add that new element to the end of the list. So I'm going to change the element name, the key name of this new product to B, and let's say that this is for our bran muffin product. Taking a food theme today here. And bran muffins are $3.99, and they are on a special sale, so we'll mark that Boolean to be true. Okay and okay. And then likewise, we'll add in our product C there, and this will be for our chocolate cake. Chocolate cake sells for $13.99, and it's currently not on a special sale price. Okay there and okay. All right. Now I'm going to duplicate that show custom dialog, Command D, and let's learn a little bit more about how to dig into JSON data. While you saw the list keys function back here, there's also a list values function that returns all of the values in the key or index or path we specify. So JSON list keys and JSON list values are very similar. We can point it to the same JSON container, of course, and we could point it to the root. But let's be more specific. Let's say that we want to just return the values from product whose key name is B, letter B. Remember, that was the second one. That was our bran muffins. Okay, so JSON list values will dig into that JSON data, find the product whose key name is B, and return all of its values. I'll save, And we'll run it with the debugger and the data viewer showing. Step into, okay, it creates the product variable, which looks just like it did before. Now we'll step into the second one and look at the product variable now. It's got another row, so to speak, another product B, right? Key name B, value of brand muffin, price, and on sale. And likewise, we'll step into this third time. That adds product C to the product variable. Look at that. So it's really kind of like we can build a table of data where we have rows, records, if you will, A and B and C, with columns, name and price and special, within each row or record. Okay, so now we're asking it to return the keys, to list all the keys at the root level, and that should bring us A and B and C as a value list, not as JSON data, but as a value list. And next, we're going to ask it to return just the values from product B, which should give us the brand muffin and its price and its special status, true or false. 1 means true, 0 would have indicated a false. Nice. So we've seen how we can use objects. Now let's try an array, a list of items without keys. We'll create a new variable and we'll call this one suppliers. Okay, and for its value, again, we'll use our JSON Set Element function, which I've got copied over here. So I'll just paste it in the nice formatted manner that I like it. And for the JSON, it's going to be the same variable, suppliers. For the key or index or path, this is where we have to specify what element we're trying to set something within. If we're trying to set something just at the root level, then we just put quote, quote, as we've talked about before. For the value, we're going to add an array, and we know that those values have to be enclosed in quotes. And for the type of value, this time it's going to be a JSON array. And again, that goes back to those valid value types that I showed you earlier. Here they are again. Okay, so this time we're using a JSON array. That'll be our value type. Here we go. So now we start building the value, the hard part. We know that arrays, have to be surrounded in square brackets. So I'll go ahead and add my opening square bracket there, and then we'll come down a couple of lines and indent and add my closing square bracket there. And that's all quoted, so that's great. And then we'll go back up in between and we'll indent an appropriate amount. Okay, and here we simply start listing the items that we want in this array. If they're text strings, they have to be wrapped in quotes, and we put commas between them. And we'll just use the first 3 letters of the Greek alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma. But again, you're thinking, wait, Tim, wait, you can't, because those quotes are going to throw off. You're exactly right. This quote and this quote would be misconstrued as being the starting and ending of a quoted passage. So all the quotes that need to be there around our values, in this case, our array values, must be escaped, lest they be misconstrued as the ending of this quoted passage here that really needs to begin here and end here. So we'll go in and add the escape character, the backslash character, to escape those quote characters, like so. There we go. All right, we'll say okay to that and okay to that. And now let's duplicate that show custom dialog line, and we'll add in another dialog statement down here. And this one, let's say we just want it to list all the values in the suppliers array. Okay, so we want to use JSON list values. Good. We're going to point to a different variable, the suppliers variable, where we've been storing that data, and we want to get them all from the root. So we're just going to put quote, quote as the key or index or path that we want to grab the values from. In addition to that, though, I'd love to show you how to grab one particular element out of an array. So let me duplicate that show custom dialog statement again and get into it and say, and for this, I'm going to jump over and dump this, and we'll use our JSON get element function. The JSON get element function will grab the value out of a specific element that we get to specify by its object name, its array index number, or some more sophisticated path. So JSON get element simply asks us, okay, where's your body of JSON data? Well, it's in our suppliers variable. And then for the path, let's say we want to grab supplier index number 1. Well, these keys or index or paths have to be quoted. So I'm going to add the quotes first, and then to supply or to specify row number 1 or index number 1 from an array, we use the square bracket notation with the desired index number in between. Now remember, arrays are 0 based. So when I ask for item number 1 out of an array, I'm really asking for the second item because the first item is index number 0. Say okay there. And okay there, and save the script, and let's run it with the data viewer showing. All right, we've already run through these first few. We know they're working great, so I won't show you those variables. The dialog boxes appear fine and good. All right, here we go. Suppliers variable gets created right here. There it is, and it's a nice healthy array, right? JSON arrays are surrounded by square brackets. The items inside them are quoted if they're text, that is, if they're strings, and separated by commas. Now let's see how our dialog boxes come out. Let me widen this a little bit, make it easier to read. There we go. And our first dialog box, we're saying, hey, list all the values from the root level of that supplier's JSON data. And it should give us our 3 values, alpha, beta, gamma. And it does. Fantastic. This next one should just give us beta, the index number 1, or in other words, the second row of that array, and it does as well. Nice. So that's how you reach into an array, how you build an array and reach into an array. So, and again, an array is simply a list of values that don't have keys. All right, next, let's build a little more sophisticated JSON body of data here. I'll set a new variable. This one I'm going to call product plural, different than in lines 1, 2, and 3. And we're going to use our JSON format elements wrapped around our JSON set elements. And I've got one of those over here ready to paste. Ah, beautiful. Remember, JSON format elements is the function that just turns the JSON that's inside it into a nice, pretty, easy to read data by adding line breaks and indents. Okay, for the set element, we'll refer to our same product variable, like so. And then for the key or the index or the path, here, let's say we want to create a multi-row array, okay, an array of unnamed items. In a table of data, do we name our records? No, we give them ID numbers, or we just think of them as record number 1, record number 2, record number 3. In the same way, we can use an array where we just number each row, or where each row is numbered for us, okay? But we do need to give the array a name, and to do that, we're going to say, in quotes, of course, let's call it our product array. And then to specify that we'd like to fill product number 0, we use square brackets with the 0 index number in between. In other words, our first product number 0, is going to have the following value and is going to be of the following type. In this case, the type is going to be the type of our value. The value is going to be a set of 3 different key value pairs. So 3 key value pairs, a group of key value pairs we learned earlier, means an object. So our type is going to be a JSON object. All right, we know that objects need to be surrounded in curly braces. So I'll start my opening curly brace, come down a couple of lines, put my closing curly brace, and then go back up in between, use good looking indenting. And now we just list off our key value pairs separated by commas. I know we're going to need to escape the quotes. I don't need to bug you about that again. You know why I'm doing it now. We've done it twice before. Remember how a key value pair is separated by a colon, right? It goes key, then colon, then value. Oops. And the first product is again going to be a donut, and then a comma. And our second product is again going to be a, sorry, not second product yet. We're ready for the price of the donut. There we go. And the price is $1.99, and a comma because we've got one more key value pair that we want included in this product 0 row. And we want to indicate whether it's on special or not. So we'll give the key name special, colon, and let's say the donuts are not on special right now. So we use the Boolean false. Okay, we've got our opening and closing string here. We've got all of our quotes escaped. Everything looks good there. It's going to be pretty because we formatted it. And we'll say okay and okay. And let's duplicate that twice to add 2 more products. We'll come in and say, hey, at row number 1, at index number 1, we want bran muffins. Bran muffins are going for $3.99, and that's on a special sale price. So we'll say, yep, they are on special. That Boolean is true. And for our third product, likewise, product row number 2 in this case will be our chocolate cake. And that sells for $13.99, not on a special sale. So we've got now the building of 3 items in this slightly more sophisticated JSON data. Now let's see how to reach into it and grab just the data value that we want from a specific row. I'll grab a copy of this show custom dialog and bring it down below. And we'll say, all right, we want to get an element out of the product JSON data, products plural, right? That's what we called it back up here on lines 11, 12, 13. And then we get to specify, or we'll need to specify a very specific path here, right? The product JSON data has a product array. The name of the key of that array is product. The values in it aren't, or the rows in it aren't named, they're numbered. Let's say we want to grab the value out of the second row, which is index number 1 because of the 0-based indexing of arrays. And then we use the dot notation to say, but we want to be more specific, we want to grab the value of the name property or the name key, let's call it, right? The name key out of that second product row. So this is a path that says go into this object, this key, which is an array, go into row number 1 of that array, and in that row number find a key whose name is name and go and bring back its value. Let's see if it'll work. We'll save that and run it with the debugger and the data viewer showing. I'll quickly skip or move through these first few lines. That's all working great. Yep. And beta, yep. Okay, now here we go. So products is not yet born. As we step into that line, we get our new products variable just created. And at this point, it's got nice, pretty JSON data that has a key of product, and then its colon, and then its value surrounded in square brackets, which of course means this is an array. Now at this point, it's only a 1-row array, but that's fine. It's got room to grow. And then within that row of the array is an object. Objects are surrounded by curly braces, and that object is full of 3 key value pairs, which are so self-explanatory. Nice, that's working well. And then we're going to continue on in the same manner, adding 2 more rows to that product array. I'll step into that one and then step into that one, and I'll show you the end result. Look at that. We've got now an array, square brackets, with 3 objects or 3 rows, each row separated from the next by a comma there, the comma there. Beautiful, great looking JSON data. All right, and now let's see if our show custom dialog can reach into the middle row, right? Index numbers 0, then 1, then 2. So we're asking for row number 1, which is the second row out of that product array, and grab the name value, which should be bran muffin. There we go. Now that we have some knowledge of FileMaker's JSON functions to read and write JSON data, let's apply it practically. In some of our scripts, we pass data into them as script parameters. Up until now, we've been using value lists to package and send multiple values, which works fine. But JSON data is so much more self-describing and will make those script parameters easier to work with. Here in this generate treatment invoice script, it's a report script. It generates a report with the help of the output report script that it calls down here on line 23, right? It sets up all the pieces in play, and then it says, okay, now let's call that output report script. There, we perform the script passing in 3 pieces of information that output report script uses. Let's revise that package of data to go out in JSON format instead of as a value list. Here's the parameter. Okay. The 3 arguments we're passing into the output report script are the file name to use on the PDF, a Boolean value here, a 1 or a 0, to indicate if multiple records should be output or just the current record. And then lastly, the name of any appendices that should be added to the end of the PDF. And we can see those 3 arguments here in the name of the script. File name, multiple records, yes or no, and anything to append. Let's take a different approach in packaging up those 3 pieces of information. Let's use our format elements and set element. Okay. For the JSON, here, we don't have a variable defined anywhere where we're going to store this JSON data. Now, this argument can either be supplied, or you can either supply this argument with a variable or with a field that holds text, or with a string of text that is or is going to become JSON data. We can actually start a new JSON object just by putting, in quotes, a pair of opening and closing curly braces. Okay? Because the set elements function returns the resulting JSON. So we don't really need to invent a variable just to have some place to store this stuff. It'll be kind of self-filling. Okay. Now, the key or index or path, and then the value and the type. As with many FileMaker functions, if we need to use these more than once, if we needed to specify several elements or set several elements, we can wrap these up into square brackets. Very much like the substitute function allows you to create multiple substitutions by wrapping the substitution pairs into square brackets. So I'm going to change up the look of this a little bit, and we're going to go like that and like that. And then we'll say square bracket there, square bracket there, and a semicolon afterwards. All right. So now the first key or index or path name, the first key name that we want to use is quote file name, end quote. Now I don't need to escape those quotes because we're not inside a quoted string. For the value, we're going to use the file name variable that's been introduced earlier in this script up here on line 8. And for the type, that's a string, so JSON string. Now, I'm going to highlight all that and copy it and paste it twice, but get rid of that closing semicolon. The next key that we want to create, the next key value pair, is going to be called something like multiple records. And for its value, we wanted to give it the value of 1 because this particular report does need to print multiple records. And that's a JSON Boolean number, excuse me. That's a JSON number. Actually, it's a JSON Boolean, like so, because it's 1 or it's 0. And then the last argument was the append argument that we pass into that script. And for this one, we wanted to pass in the word terms because there's a terms and conditions layout that we want to append to the end of our invoices. All right, so we will, by the time this script step will have run, we will have created a new JSON object that's got 3 key value pairs in it: file name, multiple records, and append, each set to their own respective values. I'll say okay there. I'll save the script. And then we'll also need to rework our output report script to parse the incoming script parameter as JSON rather than as a value list. So here's where we grab the incoming script parameter that'll now be JSON data. And here's where we start parsing it up into its 3 pieces: file name, multiple records, and append. I'll go into that first one and say, all right, we're not using get value anymore. Rather, we're using JSON get element. Okay. JSON get element. The JSON lives in a variable that was just created called param. And the key name for this first piece, we called it file name, like so. I'm going to copy that so it's easy to use again. And then we'll go into this multiple records variable and likewise say, pass that or paste that in. And I think we called that key name multiple records. And lastly, we had a key name. So get rid of that old approach. We had a key name of append, like so. All right, I'll save that script as well. And then let's go ahead and open up. Actually, I'll navigate over to visits. And let me get to a visit record that I know has a good invoice ready to build. There we go. And we'll get the script debugger and the data viewer showing as we ask that invoice script to run. All right, we want to generate an invoice PDF for this particular visit to by this customer. The script debugger jumps in. We'll start working our way through. All right, it creates a variable called file name. There we go. And so on. And that's all going well. Good. Right, we sort, we set the page setup properly. Go to preview mode. We'll size and center the window so that it looks great on the screen. And now we come to our output report script to call, we're calling that script. So I'll step into that one and it's going to pass in that JSON data. Okay. Now watch as we set this variable called param where it's going to grab that script parameter. Let's see what it looks like. Outstanding. It's well-formed, nicely formatted JSON data with our key value pairs. Notice that they don't appear in the same order they were invented in. They appear in alphabetical order by key name. So append comes first, even though we added it to the JSON data object last. And then file name, colon, and its value, and then multiple records, colon, and its Boolean value. Okay, cool. I think I might have trouble with that true. I changed my idea, changed my plan at the last minute. I should have set that as Boolean as a number instead of a Boolean, but we'll see how it goes. Let's say file name there, good, multiple records. Good, it worked out fine, of course, because the Boolean concept of true is identical to the numeric concept of 1. And then append gets set to terms. And then we continue on our way through. So the parsing or the packaging and sending and the parsing up once received of the JSON data worked great. We'll say I want to generate a PDF of that. And away it goes with the rest of the script. And we wrote this script in one of our earlier sessions. It's going to tack on the terms and conditions page to that layout, or to the report. And Takes us back, and there we go. All right, so our script parameters are now going to be easier to read and more self-documenting. And that is JavaScript Object Notation and how it works in FileMaker. Any questions about what we looked at today?